everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate. Welcome back to Special Education Advocacy with Ashley Barlow. I'm Ashley Barlow, and I'm so happy you're here. Today, we're going to talk about one of my most practical tips when I advocate for inclusion. Now, the reason that we're talking about this is because in my practice and also in my personal life with friends, I'm having people ask me a lot about inclusion. And I think it might be because my referrals kind of come from my friends to begin with, but I have a lot of kids that are in middle school and high school now in my practice. And inclusion gets a little trickier in some ways and a little easier in some ways when you reach those transition ages. And there are, by transition age, yes, that is also technically transition age, over 14 or over 16, depending on what state you're in. But I'm talking about transition to middle school or transition to high school. And so as you kind of face this transition to middle school, which the Barlow family is facing, our Jack is going to middle school, or the transition to high school, you need to look at when you're going to get your special education, when you're going to be with your general education peers, when you're going to get your related services. You need to start looking at that vis-a-vis the entire school schedule, vis-a-vis the entire day. And I talk about this in my inclusion workshop. And in the inclusion workshop, you kind of get the whole background on what the law says we have to consider. And then we plug in all of those factors into those arguments. This is one piece of the puzzle. So I am not saying this is the entire puzzle. It is absolutely not. But this one practical tip oftentimes is the thing that takes us over, that gets something done at the IEP table. Because it's so practical that it's kind of like hard to say no to. So you've built the entire IEP. You've talked about present levels. The present levels establish the need for the goals. And then you've developed goals, and you've talked about the specially designed instruction that you're going to have for the goals, right? And so you talk about the special education minutes, and you're talking about the least restrictive environment when we're talking about those special education services and the quote unquote minutes in the IEP. And so as we're talking about those things, we need to look really practically at the school day. And so oftentimes what I say in meetings like this is, okay, hang on 1 second. What is the schedule? Can you please give me the schedule? So in our middle school, for example, I will tell you that we have 7 class periods, and most of the kids on IEPs use one of those class periods for specially designed instruction. You don't have to, but most of the children that could benefit from an entire class period, 45 minutes per day or however long it is per day, get to the opportunity to use one of those for kind of pull out resource special education time. The way I'm describing it sounds like predetermination, and I know a lot of you are like, that's predetermination, but it truly is, in my experience and in the experience of many of my friends, not predetermination. It is truly individualized. And so that's one class period. Then there's 2 elective classes. And then there are the 4 content. So you have math, science, language arts or English, and social studies. And then you have 2 electives, and you have this learning strategies class. Now, if you need to take away anything else in order to get specially designed instruction done, then you do. But that is kind of like what a baseline schedule looks like. And I oftentimes say, can you tell me what the gen ed schedule is like? And that's probably how they would present it to me. Now, in the most inclusive school in the world, they probably don't say there's 3 electives, but most of the kids on IEPs, or if kids need it, they can take one of those for specially designed instruction. But, you take what you can get. So that's, and sometimes the way that they present it alone tells you how inclusive the model feels. Okay. So you look at this schedule, and this totally applies to elementary school too, right? Because children in elementary school go in, they get unpacked, maybe they do a little morning work, maybe they go straight to the carpet, maybe they do calendar and weather and their popcorn words or their sight words or whatever it is. And then maybe they do centers, and then maybe they do an hour's worth of math. They have a schedule that they follow, and the schedule might change day to day. But it's important to know, step 1, what is the schedule? Super practical. What is the schedule for the general education students? Okay, now, when you're thinking about the schedule, don't forget to think, okay, oh yes, we need specially designed instruction. We have all these goals, and we have decided how we're going to teach them, and we need that instruction. So step 2 is, could any of that specially designed instruction be pushed in a really organic, natural way? Are there specially designed services that can be pushed in to the general education classroom? Can we have maybe a collaborative class where we should do an entire podcast on collaboration and co-teaching. If you need resources on collaboration, I highly recommend the books by Paula Kluth, Kluth. See, this is what happens in my brain. It just starts going. Maybe we have collaboration, and we can kind of get some of our service minutes through a collaborative teaching model. Maybe we have a special educator that comes into a class to work on a particular goal on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, whatever, when that class is doing something else. As you get older, another thing to think about is there a particular teacher that assesses children in a way that is really equitable, that could be modified well? Is there a teacher that does project-based learning? Is there a teacher with, it could be flexible seating options, whatever it is. We have to think about this particular child, and we're thinking about where we can get time for that specially designed instruction. So I have a lot of kids that are in high school that need, maybe like 30 minutes of instruction and reading. My kids that have specific learning disabilities, and they're taking 4 AP classes. And so I say to the students, or I say to the parents to ask the students, usually I don't usually interact with the students on a normal basis. But I say to the parents, ask them if there's a teacher that is finished a little bit early. Is there a teacher that does 20 minutes of great instruction and then you work independently? Because if there is, and if she doesn't need a whole lot of help on that independent work, then that can become homework for her and she can go get that reading instruction then. But if it's band and they are playing, they're practicing their pieces for the entire 45 minutes or 56 minutes or whatever it is, then we don't want to leave that class, because that is really hands-on and important work to have. And so we're kind of thinking, where can we organically get services in the classroom? Or where is there a spot where it might be almost no harm, no foul by way of the gen ed curriculum, in order to have some pull out time, in order to go out for resource time or pull out special education? And so then we kind of look at what's left, right? We say, okay, so we know that we can get 20 minutes here and 30 minutes here and 45 minutes here and whatever. Is that enough? Is that enough time to be able to teach what we need to teach. We had these goals, the present levels identified these goals, and we wrote these goals, and we know how we're going to teach the goals. And sometimes figuring out how much time it's going to teach the goals is really easy, because it's like, well, it's Orton Gillingham, and to do it with fidelity, we need this many minutes. That's really easy. I need 45 minutes a day, or I need whatever. Sometimes it's not so easy. And we really kind of have to take like the teacher's gut, and the parents have to research and be like, well, I don't know how long it's going to take you if you work every day on fractions for 15 minutes. Is that enough, or is that too much? I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to take you. But we kind of, all put our heads together and we say, is that enough? Right? And if it isn't, then we start borrowing time other places and we see how we're going to figure it out. And if it is, great, maybe we can even put some more time back onto the gen ed side of the ledger. Okay? So we are looking at what's left. And what we have to decide is, does this jive with all of the schedules here? We've got special education teachers. We've got general education teachers. We've got the OT that's only there on Thursdays. We've got all of these people. Does all of this kind of jive? And the answer to that is always going to be no. And that is okay. An interest that the school has, remember, I talk about interest-based negotiation. An interest that the school has that is super duper important is the scheduling. The scheduling is a nightmare. If you ask any school administrator what was the worst part of the first year and a half of COVID, it is the scheduling. They had to change their schedules so many times as schools went to remote, off of remote. These people could come in, these people couldn't come in. All of this stuff, this scheduling is awful. So it's never going to be like, oh yes, that's perfect. But maybe you get to a point that the schedule is like tolerable, and then you're just, kind of reworking the things like that video game Tetris, seeing if you can fit people together, because teachers are teaching small group. The special educators might have small groups, or the speech teacher might have small groups, or maybe there's a teacher that isn't there all 5 days of the week, so we're trying to kind of figure it out. So we figure that out, and then we've got to plug in those related services. We've got to plug in the speech and the OT and the PT and the orientation and mobility. We've got to plug in the transition work. So then we plug that in and we see where we can borrow time. Remember that those things might not be daily. They might not even be weekly. Heck, they might not even be monthly. And so at the end of the day, once we've kind of like gotten a rough picture, we say, is that enough time for specially designed instruction? And does that give us enough exposure to that general education classroom? Is this truly the least restrictive environment? And there's gonna be some shifting. There's gonna be a little bit of give and take. There's gonna be some push and some pull. And don't forget, there are things in the schedule for the teachers that can't change, right? Like they can't change their lunch. Sometimes they can't change their recess because other people use the school. They can't change their special area classes. So if you find 20 beautiful minutes, but they're going to cut into gym, what does that do to the child? What does that do to the goals of the team? It might be fine, it might not be. But you can't say, well, can we move gym? Because that shifts the entire schedule. You might be talking about a kindergartner, and by shifting gym, you've affected K through 5 or K through 6th grade, because the schedules are so crazy in education. You also have to think about the teacher schedule. I've had people say, well, what about if we do it during your planning period? Well, planning periods can be really, really helpful to teachers at a specific time, which you don't really think about. You think, oh, you just get time in your day to plan if you're a parent. But sometimes they plan with their grade level peers. So sometimes they, all of the 3rd grade teachers have planning at the same time so that they can say, well, how did you teach this? Did that really work? Or how did you teach this? Or here's this material that I have or that I bought or whatever. And that can be super helpful for them. And they also might plan vertically. They might plan, third grade should be talking to fourth grade so that fourth grade knows what third grade just did. And they might also have district-wide planning so that they can talk to teachers at other schools in the district. And so, we can't always take time from their planning periods. And same thing applies to the special educator. They have very busy schedules. If there's one person in a school that has the most chaotic life, it is the special education teacher. They have to take all of that data. They have to do all the reporting. They have to do all of the scheduling. They have to teach all of that content. They have to modify all of that general education work. I see the modified tests that come home with my son, and his classroom teacher could, I don't know what her caseload is, but she could have 12 kids on her caseload. And I think, holy cow, if you are doing that for Jack and 11 other children, I don't think you sleep at night. I just don't think it's possible. So they have all of that work to do, and their planning is really important. They've got to talk to every single teacher and be like, when's the science test and what's it on? When's the math test and what's it on? I was thinking about doing this. What do you think about this? Hey, could I borrow this student for this particular thing because, they're going to go down and read to the kindergartners and it's going to be really great, but I don't want to take them away from the science experiment. All of that communication, all that collaboration, that is a lot of work. So we want to make sure that we're sensitive to their schedule, because if they have the optimum schedule, it in turn will make an optimum situation for the child. And then you think about the other students, right? So like maybe we say, okay, 10 to 10:30 is going to be this great time. But another great thing is that little Johnny goes to small group with, maybe Finn from across town. And Finn from across town is a wonderful language model, totally gets Johnny. They play well together. They really feed off of one another. They have this wonderful speech group. And Finn's class is in gym, which is Finn's favorite thing, at 10 o'clock. Well, guess what? The teachers can't be like, oh, that's not going to work because of Finn, because that is a violation of Finn's privacy. And so teachers sometimes get kind of stuck, which is one of the reasons why people are like, I think they're hiding stuff. Well, they have to protect children's privacies, right? But sometimes we can say, well, does that affect small group? If we moved it, would the small group still be able to happen? And if teachers are really thinking about it, they will pause and be like, let me think. Okay, yeah, I think that'll work, because I think fourth grade is, doing science at that time or whatever. They typically know what is happening in every single classroom in that building at any time. Right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to listen to the interests of everybody on the team, everybody in that school, and we're trying to kind of steal minutes so that we can make something work. We had this like kind of fluffy thing going on, and now we're trying to kind of fine tune it. This strategy works so well because we're looking at the actual school day. We are still saying, what does the child need? How much general education does the child need? How much special education does the child need? But we are plugging it into the day. And that is usually very, very helpful both for the parents and for the school team to actually see it in practicality. To be pragmatic about it is usually very, very helpful. I hope this strategy helps you. We are here at the peak of IEP season. If you need more help with inclusion, you can hop over to my website and check out the inclusion workshop. It's about an hour and a half of videos. It's got a big, long, amazing workbook. This is probably the product that I'm quite frankly most proud of. I needed to make this for myself to use in my practice, and I thought, well, I may as well record a video for you. It is super helpful. It goes through the law, what the regulations say, what the Department of Ed has said by way of OSEP and OSERS, dear colleague letters and policy documents. And then it goes through the practical considerations. This is just one piece of it, and I didn't even go all the way into detail on this. I hope it's super helpful, and I will see you same time, same place next week.